So you had just mentioned that in your historicals, you have a boundary in terms of steam where there's no full penetrative sex until after some sort of marriage ceremony. And that actually ties in with a question that I had as you were reading, thinking about, and this is something that we all have to think about as historical romance authors. So I'm curious about your take on, for the modern reader, having modern sex positivity and then entering the world of historical romance where our characters would have different sensibilities. How do you think about that?
So I made a conscious choice when I started writing that this was the way I wanted to do it, that I would have plenty of, explicitness in the scenes leading up to it, and that they would kind of grow in heat as they progressed, and that, the marriage would have more than just the vows exchanged, that finally having penetrative sex was truly the consummation of their feelings and of that commitment that they made, because there's no going back after that. Whether she's a virgin or not, there's no going back after that. And I do have in A Harlot at the Highland Court a woman who made not a great choice and wound up pregnant, and the hero comes in and saves the day. So it's not like every single one of my books has a virgin heroine. An Angel at the Highland Court, she was handfasted before she met the man she fell in love with. But for me, it's more of that moment, is that culmination, like I said, of everything that has led up to it. And so it's as much an emotional bonding moment as it is a physical one. And so that is kind of also the point where we've been leading into us versus them. But once they're married, it truly is us against the world. And I think that I have angst in my stories, but it's not angst between them. For me, as an author, I don't need to get through two-thirds of the book before the couple is together. For me, if you're going to be together, you should have figured that out within two-thirds of a book, especially when you write long books like I do. If you write 150 to 200 page books and that's what you read, then that's different. But when you write 300-page books, two-thirds is 200 pages of like, are you or aren't you? Like, haven't you not figured this out already? And so I'm very much an us against the world kind of feel when it comes to the couples. But as far as, the modernity of how we write, just to draw a comparison, I write Kinky Mafia as Sabine Barclay, and marriage is not a consideration. You do you, boo, and they do a whole lot. So I think that for me as an author, that is not like a moral line for me. That's not why I drew it where I did. But moving forward, I think that as a genre, we are going to have to be more flexible in that. And it's not that you necessarily have to be more explicit in your storytelling, but just recognize the truth. There have been illegitimate children since nearly the dawn of time, born on the wrong side of the blanket kind of deal. It's not something that necessarily, for a few centuries was socially acceptable to talk about, but there are cultures where being a bastard was not the end of the world, and that, promiscuity was not the end of the world, that having sex before marriage was not the end of the world. We have the Victorians to thank for kind of whitewashing all of that. So, even when we get to the point where we kind of catch up with those modern senses, it's not historically inaccurate to do that.
Mhm.
Just because we have a particular notion right now of what histrom is doesn't mean that that's the way it should stay. And I think, in order to continue our readership, we're going to have to acknowledge that reader expectations are different, and that's not a bad thing. That it is a reflection still of what truly happened. Illegitimacy is not a newfound concept, and I
Right.
think we will all survive.
I agree. Well, and I think it ties in a lot of your, like, as you were describing the castle and the Undercroft and even their clothes, you clearly know all of the historical details. Sometimes I think the instinct to say, oh no, it wasn't that way, is an instinct to protect like the stakes of why these people aren't having sex or adding intrigue because of that. But there are actually historical details we can use that there are stakes, but it was still happening.
Oh yeah. I mean, it does not take a degree in sociology or anthropology or biology to understand how humans come together. And part of why we love reading and writing romance is that push and pull, that dynamic, that discovery of emotions and how they are unique to that one other person. And there is a physical manifestation of that, whether you indulge it or repress it or however you want to look at it. There is a physiological reaction to attraction. So for me and the way I write, I see no harm in expressing that. We all have our thresholds of interest and comfort, but for me, I don't think writing explicit scenes diminishes from all the other action that goes on in my stories. I would say that I do write romantic suspense. Like there's a lot of where are we going? Who's the bad guy? What's going to happen next? Why did that happen? That question of can I figure out truly who the villain is for the reader to have as they're progressing through the story. So yeah, there are explicit scenes and there's quite a few of them. But when you write 300 to 400 page books, there's also a whole lot going on in between. Even if I had 10 or 15 sex scenes, there's still a
Sure.
whole lot going on.